Systemic failures and egregious poor decision-making. That's the conclusion from the damning preliminary report from a Texas House committee investigating the May 24th shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde. Perhaps the most egregious failure is the fact that there were 376 law enforcement officers on site as teachers and children lay dying, with no one from law enforcement making a move on the shooter for nearly 73 minutes. I'm going to say that again. 376 good guys with guns were present and did not stop one bad guy with a gun. As the Texas Tribune points out, it was a force larger than the garrison that defended the Alamo. The report details how no one took command, and what was glaringly clear was that law enforcement responders failed to adhere to their active shooter training, and they failed to prioritize saving the lives of innocent victims over their own safety. Following the report, the Uvalde mayor released body cam videos from officers at the school that day. While some show school law enforcement outside helping to evacuate children out of classroom windows, it also showed those in the hallway right outside the classroom where the shooter was, waiting and waiting, seemingly unsure of what to do. It even shows the much criticized Uvalde School District Police Chief Pete Arredondo not trying to break down the door, but rather trying to negotiate with the shooter.
Let me know if there's any kids in there or anything. This could be peaceful.
We also learned from the body cam footage that at least some of the officers were aware that children inside that classroom were alive and calling 911 for help.
Yeah, Mr. Rising, you do have a child on the line.
Hey, what was that?
It's going to be room 12. I will need to see he is in the room full of victims at this moment.
And yet, it still took these nearly 400 officers, more than an hour, to take out one shooter. And here's where the disconnect kicks in. Because we're led to believe from TV shows and movies that the role of the police is to bust in and save the day. But more often than not, in the real world, what actually happens is that police in these situations go to their training, which is to prioritize self-preservation. In another example, today was the start of the sentencing trial for the gunman in the 2018 Parkland school shooting in Florida, where 17 students and staff members were killed. Now, if you recall, there was an armed school resource officer present that day. But when the shooting started, he ran in the opposite direction. Now, what also happens in most cases is that often the threat has been cleared before law enforcement even arrive at the scene, like what happened last night in Indiana, where a gunman who opened fire in a mall, killing 3 people in the food court, was shot and killed by a civilian. And then there are all the situations where there's no actual threat, where police do not hesitate to use their weapons, as appears to be the case with Jayland Walker, where 8 Ohio police officers emptied their clips into Walker as he ran away from them after a brief high-speed car chase following a traffic violation. Now, police claim that he shot at them from his car, but they haven't produced any evidence of that. And this weekend, we learned that the medical examiner somehow failed to test Walker's hands for gunshot residue. So all we have is the word of the department, which, let's face it, has an interest in the outcome. What we do know from the medical examiner's report is that the unarmed 25-year-old DoorDash driver suffered 46 gunshot wounds. 46. Texas State Representative James Tallarico joins me now, along with former Detroit Police Chief Ralph Godbee. Thank you both for being here. And Representative Tallarico, I want you to start, because this situation of having more law enforcement officers than the forces at the Alamo, but seemingly completely confused as to what to do, standing around, milling around, they did manage to threaten to arrest people outside, including parents who were trying to go in and do it, and go into the room and go into the classroom. But they didn't do the thing people expect. What do you make of this report and its results and its findings?
Joy, I'm so full of rage at this story, at this report. I was a middle school teacher before I ran for office, and my students were just a little bit older than those babies in Uvalde. This report shows that Uvalde had everything Republicans claim we need. We had hundreds of good guys with a gun. We had hardened security. We had a reduced number of doors. The only thing those students and those teachers in Uvalde didn't have was sane gun policy. You know, we as a country are not an outlier in school security. We're not an outlier in mental health. We are an outlier in the number of readily accessible weapons of war. And until we address that, we're never going to protect our children and our educators. You know, I as a teacher, I can say that nothing will ever change, nothing, until we love our children more than we love our guns.
You know, there's been a lot of criticism of the governor, of Greg Abbott, including your fellow state senator, Roland Gutierrez. This is what he had to say about Governor Abbott. Take a look.
Since day 3, he hasn't been back to Uvalde, and he's refused to ask for any kind of accountability here. And he's done nothing but put obstacles in this district attorney and other people that he's put in place. He did not go to any single funeral. He never has come back.
Essentially accusing him of sort of shading the truth. He did lie initially, came out and did this fancy press conference festooned with police officers all around him and told a story that turned out not to be true and hasn't been to a single funeral. Your thoughts about the governor's response?
Joy, you know, you know me well, and I try to be careful with what I say, but Texans are dying. The kids in Uvalde, the teachers in Uvalde, the hundreds of Texans who died during the blackout last year, the Texans who died needlessly from COVID-19 because our governor chose to open bars too early in the pandemic. Greg Abbott is the greatest public safety threat in our state. He is the greatest public safety threat to Texans right now. And so we need to elect Beto O'Rourke our next governor. And I don't say that as a Democrat. I don't say that as a member of the blue team. I say that as a Texan who wants to see my constituents, who wants to see my neighbors kept safe. That's what's at stake in this election. This is beyond party politics. This is about public safety in every sense of the word.
Right. And, you know, I want to bring you in here, Chief Godbee, because the thing that, you know, we talked about this on the call this morning to take you guys inside our conversations is that, let me read you this. Rolling Stone correspondent Jack Crosby wrote something about what police officers actually really do. He says the issue that their jobs often have nothing to do with serving or protecting civilians. The police's ability to prevent crime is basically zero. They can only respond to it, which happens to be a part of their job that they're worst at. The part of their job that police are good at is projecting physical force onto whichever elements of society the state deems to be undesirable. In non-academic terms, that largely means they're good at beating up on people who annoy them or harassing people that local governments want to minimize. I mean, and he meant that to say that police aren't bad at everything, but police are really good at projecting force on civilians who are not really a threat to them. That is what happened in Uvalde. Outside of the school, they were pushing people around. Inside, when it comes to facing gunshots, police don't really do that, right? I mean, only like 1%, 2, 3, 4% of what police even do is responding to violent assault in which they could get shot.
Joy, that article, again, is probably a seminal article in describing what the state of policing is in America. Joy, there's a saying we had when I ran recruiting in the early 90s. Some people are meant to call the police. Some people are meant to be the police. And you got a lot of people there that were probably meant to be the police and never, ever should have a badge or a gun. The hypersensitivity to perceived threat over the actual response to actual crime committed is so disproportionate. And it goes to training. It goes to who we select as police officers. Unfortunately, Detroit, we buried today Lauren Courts. He ran to the danger, killed with a semi-automatic weapon. That is the best of policing when we respond, and we respond in that way. But unfortunately, Joy, we just don't see that in mass. And we have to look at policy. We have to look at laws. There's a level of cowardice here and just mishandling of this situation that you talk to police executives across the country, police officers. It is literally embarrassing.